Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of The Cycle Breaker Show. My name is Tiffany Toombs Clevenger. I'm one of your hosts, joined by my husband with a mullet,
Yeah,
Sid
yeah.
Clevenger.
If you
Sid
want to see the
Clevenger.
mullet, you gotta turn it on YouTube. It is a fresh cut mullet.
Well, you're
East
wearing a hat.
Tennessee bred,
Nobody can see the true mullet because you got a hat on.
true mullet. Oh, oh.
We're breaking
See,
the
you see
cycle.
this? You see this? This is the joy of it because there's two haircuts in one. It's business in the front.
One episode in the future will be about breaking the cycle of the mullet, but not today. Today, we are going to be talking about common manipulation tactics that happen in all relationships, but I think we learn them in our family first, and then they kind of waft out from there. We learn that as a way of dealing with our emotions, or even avoiding the problem as opposed to dealing with the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's simple, when it comes to a lot of our trauma, like you say, like it starts at a very young age, usually the age between 0 and 7 or when we're kids. And, I think it's real easy to, as us being new parents, it's obviously something that we're constantly, making sure we don't do and like little words and phrases and things that we say. But, I think manipulation starts at a very, very young age. And someone that has been through manipulation with their family, I mean, I can tell you example after example of it. And, I think like when we're taught that, it becomes real easy to be manipulated later on in life and kind of, expand on the childhood trauma that kind of kickstarted it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about two forms of trauma or two forms of manipulation in particular in this episode. And, in a previous episode, we talked about the 5 core childhood wounds. One of these definitely, potentially even both, leads to a feeling of abandonment and rejection and even potentially humiliation. And the outcome that I typically see with people who have experienced these forms of manipulation, and they are manipulative, but they are, you're people listening to this, like, this has probably been the norm for you. Like, you've experienced this, likely one of these two, so many times that you've stopped realizing that it's manipulative. But
Yeah.
the end outcome really is that I see people, like, the behavior that I see them showcasing is people pleasing and then looking for that external validation. Now, here's the crazy thing. Did you know that somebody who seeks external validation is easier to manipulate?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see it all over. We see it all over. I mean, at least you and I see it over a lot of things, like, not just family, but, we see it over people who get manipulated to do things they probably know they shouldn't do, but are told they'd be the hero if they did.
And then for people who seek external validation, of which people pleasing is really a type of seeking external validation, um, they, for people who seek that external validation, praise, so complimenting them, as well as criticizing them, then become forms of manipulation. Did you know that?
I mean, when you put it that, I never heard you say it that exact way, but, just by saying it, yeah, I have examples of both.
Yeah. So let me explain that one. And I wasn't even originally planning on talking about this form of manipulation. So there's still two other ones. But if you've got somebody who's seeking external validation, right? All you have to do, if you were a manipulative person, and I'm not sharing this so that you can go out and manipulate people, I'm sharing this so that you can be aware of where you may be unintentionally manipulating people. If you're
Or people
seeking,
are manipulating you and you don't know
yeah.
what's happening.
So this really, again, starts in childhood, right? Because between the ages of 0 and 7, the child sees mom and dad as like the heroes. They're never going to lie. A child is programmed to seek external validation. That is part of their development journey. And so all you have to do is validate or compliment the person. right? Like we see it in chat all the time. He'll do something and then he'll turn around and look at us and clap to see if he's done a good job and if we clap along, right? And if we happen to not be paying attention or something, he'll kind of come and get right in our face and see if we give him that validation.
Get right in our face. That's one way to put it.
So this is actually where this can start from. And this is why I am so careful just so careful about how we're raising chat. But anyways, if somebody's seeking external validation, all you have to do is start complimenting them. And then in a very short period of time, their brain will learn, and it does not matter what age this person is, their unconscious mind will learn that you equal feeling good, right? You are somebody who is going to feel good, and that, they can get that compliment from you. So they're going to keep coming to you for that validation. Mm-hmm. In relationships, in toxic relationships, we call this love bombing. This is how people get trapped with abusive, narcissistic, toxic partners, is they love bomb you at first. They tell you that, you're so amazing. How did I ever live without you? All of these things, all of these nice things you've always wanted to hear. Then once they realize that you're hooked on their compliments, they will flip it and start to criticize you. And at that point in time, you will do whatever it takes, because now the criticism feels so much worse than it would have before if you weren't dependent on the compliments. Now you'll do whatever it takes to get back to getting the compliments, but they're going to dole out the compliments more scarcely, less and less. More criticism, less compliments. They'll still throw you a compliment every now and then because they got to keep you on the hook. Yeah. Right. But it becomes like this cycle. So anyways,
I think it's interesting that you say that, because, I can't tell you how many relationships or how many, friendships is what I'm talking about here, but just how many people that I've came across. And then at first you're like, the thing happens first, and it's almost kind of like, well, I would never allow that. That's not okay. And then because you're wanting the friendship, or there's some sort of give and take, right? So all of a sudden you get around it more and more and more, and it just becomes more of your normal. I think this is why it's so important that you have to be so careful about, it's not even just who you're around, but the environment that you're in on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not talking about just people here. I'm talking about the environment that you surround yourself with, these things that you put your eyes in front of, and that you watch. Because at the end of the day, I think when you can get consumed by specific things over and over and over again, what you wouldn't have stood for or wouldn't have allowed as a core, as kind of like something that you would never allow in your life to happen, or, as, basically like a core pillar in your life or whatnot. All of a sudden, you start kind of giving a little, before you know it, you've given all, and your life's completely changed around what's going on because you've allowed it to happen for so long. And I think that's where people get really trapped, is they lose a piece of themselves during this process.
Now, I want to point this out because I think it's important for people to understand. You might figure this out in a relationship sense, right? Like a friendship or a partnership where you're experiencing this. But when I met Sid, he had this with a former mentor. And you've actually had it with two mentors now. So at the time, you were looking for a strong male figure, role model in your life to give you what you felt like you didn't get from your dad. Mm-hmm. Right? You wanted that strong, masculine presence in your life to be a role model for you. And this was the strategy that both of those two mentors, I know you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention names, but
I thought we could just mention names all over the place today.
This is what happened to you, right? Mm-hmm. Was one of them started, you're like family, you're like a brother, would build you up until it was time to just tear you down. Yeah. And then it became this cycle of back and forth, and it was like riding this wave. Then the other one, you're like family, you're like a son to me.
I was told that the other one you're talking about. He called me a son. Yeah. The ages, specifically what he said. We were at his house for a mastermind in Las Vegas, and
not even for a mastermind. He invited us over to his house before the mastermind.
Yeah. And then it was literally, I'm pretty sure he said this at the mastermind though, in the theater, but it was literally just kind of like, I kind of look at you as kind of like a son, and the age is right on point, right on par. And that
Mhm.
was, from what I believe, just to think like that was what he had said, like in that moment. Though it had been a lot of things that he had said or done or gestured before then for however many months it was. But then we kind of hit that peak. And then once we hit that peak, I think that was like one of the last things. It was almost kind of like it just broke at that point. We hit that peak, and then, that was kind of the height of it. And then after that, it just fell to pieces.
Yeah. And, you got hit with the, you'll always be in my life. You're important to me, blah, blah, blah. Validate, 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 compliment, 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 then take it away.
Mhm.
And you were devastated when it got taken away.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, I think, and just to preface, I think, it was kind of, I'm not cutting them any slack, and I'm not like taking away anything that they did, because what they did was horrible. And it wasn't just that it happened to me, it's that it happens to a lot of people. And now I just recognize it a lot easier. Now I look at someone who's getting treated that way and it's just so obvious. But to me, I lived through it. So obviously I had to learn this lesson not once, but twice. But I think like but I personally believe, as someone who went through this, that it was teed up still at a very young age. Because like you
Oh,
had said, I was getting stuff that I wasn't getting before. But the reason I didn't think I was getting it before was because, one, I didn't get it before, but two, right, like I had people in my life at a very young age that were very manipulative, and to this day still are.
yeah. So let's get into the two that we were actually going to talk about today. Kind of went
Okay,
on a
okay.
rabbit hole there, but I think that's important to know that, coaches, and not everybody who's doing these, like, I don't want to paint everybody as this evil person. Not everybody intentionally does this, right? It can, like we talked about in our narcissist episode that you can go back and check out, some people are actually narcissists who do this, and some people just have their own trauma, and that's what's causing them to perpetuate these manipulative patterns. So the first one I know you've experienced is, but the psychological name for it is called triangulation.
I love how you keep pointing. You got some Tiffany stories too.
Oh yeah, we do. uh so, and this was one that I very regularly experienced growing up, both in my family and in friendships. And so what triangulation is you will have conflict with one person. Let's say you have conflict with your mom.
Mhm.
And then what your mom will do, and I'm not saying you specifically, I'm just talking in general terms. Then the mom will go and recruit other people to be on her side. So might go to dad, or might go to brothers or sisters or aunts or uncles or other people in the family, and tell their side of the story, probably an exaggerated side of the story, right? In most cases, because that's what human beings
Not even
do.
exaggerated. Like you look at it as an exaggerated side of it, or a side where, um,
They don't own
little
their
pieces
part.
that matter are missing.
Yeah. So either way, they tell a side of the story that makes everybody else turn on you. And it becomes this multiple people. In my family, it was like a 4-on-1 situation all the time, right? Because I was kind of the odd one out. The cycle breakers typically are the black sheep of the family, the odd one out. And so it was like whenever I started breaking a cycle, somebody in my family would get pissed at me. The 4 would turn and be like, you know, we're not going to talk to you. You have to change your behavior, whatever it was, right?
Mhm.
There was this manipulation that if I didn't get in, that, if I didn't give in, sorry, that I was going to be abandoned, rejected, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first one, triangulation. I think this is very common. It happens in friendship groups too, right? I remember in grade 6, you know, it happened to other people in grade 6, but it happened to me in grade 7. I had a group of friends who all of a sudden one day in grade 7 just decided they didn't want to be friends with me anymore. We called it ditching, right? They ditched me. I wasn't allowed to hang out with them anymore. It happened to me like in grade 7, in grade 8, and again in like grade 10 or 11, it happened to me. And it was horrible. Like, couldn't go to the cafeteria at lunch, couldn't go to the gym at lunch because I was like, I don't want to be the loser who's sitting by themselves. I have literally nobody else to hang out with. I would go and eat in one of my teachers' classrooms, or I was on this council called peer support. Yeah. Like,
we weren't allowed to do that. Like, we were like,
well,
you had to eat in the cafeteria.
I was on in when it happened in high school. I can't remember what I did. You know what? When it happened in grade 7 and grade 8, I would get sick every day. I would fake sick. I'd go to the office, call my mom, and have to go home. Right. And then I think like 1 or 2 people like took pity on me. And so I ended up being able to go sit with them. Or in junior high, you didn't have to eat in the gym. Most people did, but you didn't have to. So I found like a little nook and cranny by myself and ate there. In high school, I was in a group called peer support. And there was like a peer support teacher who's kind of like a guidance counselor. And so I would just go and eat in her room. And I just felt like such a loser. But it is you're essentially being isolated, right? And the group is turning against you. And it is genuinely one of the worst feelings in the world.
It can be terrifying. I mean, like, I think, again, I think it's something that's so interesting about all this is like, if you're not careful, it almost becomes expected. So like, I know when I see people who are in toxic relationships, and I'm not like pointing out or like making like an assumption that it's always this group, but I mean, a lot of times we see this with women with dudes. Like it's just, you just see it a lot. I see it a lot more with women than I do with men. I'm not saying that doesn't happen because I know it does. I'm a man, but I'm just saying like when I would see like, it, and just from my specific experience, it would almost become to where it was expected and I allowed it because I was taught that at a very young age. And I had to break it. I had to break that pattern of like whatever I got into or whatever relationship I got into, that I would allow that type of behavior to happen around you. And I think it can be scary at times because I know when I started breaking it, you realize that you're going to lose a lot of people that you're around.
Yeah. And
Like,
that's why it is so
you have to be
so
strong
terrifying.
enough to be able to deal with it.
Yeah. You have to be at a point where losing people hurts less than it does to give in. Does that make sense? Like, initially, right? The first couple times we give in, firstly, we teach the other person who's perpetuating this behavior that we will give in. And so, and then every time we give in, it makes it harder for us to stick to the boundary, and it makes it easier for them to do it in the future. So you have to break this cycle, you have to get to a point where you're just so tired of the BS. You're just so tired of this pattern of being manipulated. You might even have to wake up to the fact that you are being manipulated to see, like, you know what? It is less painful for me to just let you guys go out of my life than it is to continue giving in.
What is it Tony Robbins says? He says before you'll make, for a lot of people, before they actually make drastic change, like the pain has to be enough. What is the quote he says? I know you know it.
I don't know the quote that you're talking about, but I do know that pain is our greatest catalyst for change. And the majority of people will wait until they hit rock bottom to make change.
Or the pain, literally, like for me, I know like the pain had to get to a point to where it was like suffocating. Like it was like, if I don't change, like emotionally, this is what would go through my head, but it's like, if I don't change, like I will die.
Yeah.
Like I know that sounds super extreme, but believe me when I tell you, you go through years of this, and some of you are, and you might be, that are listening to this might be going through it right now, and you're like, holy cow, like what the heck? The truth, you'll get yourself to a point if you don't make change to where you're going to feel just like, why am I even here? And like, that's where this was a huge part, I believe, of, when I was going through not only like ridiculous depression, but also like suicidal thoughts and stuff like that, was because, it got to the point to where not only did I know it was not okay, but I didn't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And then it just perpetuated over and over and over again.
So the last form of manipulation, I know we've both experienced this one as well, You ready for it?
Go for it.
The silent treatment. Again, it's another form of emotional abandonment, emotional rejection, emotional isolation. That is basically, well, you did something I don't like, or you're doing something I don't like, or you're acting in a way I don't like. So I'm just not going to talk to you. Now, I do want to put a preface on this one. There is a difference between taking a timeout and silent treatment, because you and I are both very passionate individuals, and individuals who can have a little bit of a temper sometimes. And so if you and I get into an argument, we know that we need to take a break, right? One of us needs to walk away. We need to cool our jets, then come back and have a conversation. The difference between that and a silent treatment is that the break is communicated, right? So I will say to you, I'm going to take a walk. I need to cool down. Or I'm saying, we even agreed when we first started dating that if we get into an argument and one of us needs to pull the plug on that argument, we just say time out, right? Or, it's communicated in some way. I'm going to walk away right now. I'm going to take a deep breath. I will come back in 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, when I'm calm. Whereas the silent treatment is just, they stop talking to you. They stop. And in some cases, they might even act like you don't exist.
Well, it's funny you say that because, in the preface or the initial story, which I guess is kind of like, what we use is kind of like the final story that we kind of both use, because it was kind of the final story of us just saying enough is enough and breaking through, which got us here to the Smoky Mountains. But if you remember, my own, it took me seeing it through your eyes, meaning that like you were with me and you're kind of like, this is what's going on and it's not okay. But if you remember, like the whole thing with when we found out that we had kind of gotten betrayed by my parents, the first thing my mom did was just randomly stop talking to me. Like just all of a sudden she was like, I'm not going to talk to him until he comes and he apologizes, or he comes and he does this. And it was just kind of like, you got that backwards. Like you need to come and apologize to me. But like she, if you remember, she wouldn't even come down like to communicate with you. She wouldn't even communicate with you. She would text you and then have you go to a different part of the house.
So she didn't have to see you and risk
so she wouldn't have to
communicating.
face it. It was almost kind of like she was trying to, I don't know if he was like trying to like, if she doesn't talk about it and she doesn't see me, then it magically goes away. I don't know if there was any remorse there, but like that's definitely what happened. And then of course, once I kind of saw that and understood it, it was like, wait a minute, this happens. Not only is this happening, but it has happened a lot more in the past, and it's something that isn't okay. And then I should put my foot down.
Yeah. And it becomes a learned behavior, right? Like then we learn that this is how you deal with conflict. You turn other people against that person. You give them the silent treatment, whatever it is, until you get your way.
Yeah.
So there's one thing that's going to make breaking all three of these cycles of manipulation so much easier. And that is our 7-day nervous system reset. So the 7-day nervous system reset is the tools that we start every single one of our private clients off with. It is the most powerful tools to help you get a hold on your nervous system regulation so that you control your emotions and not the other way around. And the best part is it's absolutely free. You just have to go to resetmysystem.com/reset. We'll also put that link in the show notes and in the description so that you can check it out absolutely free. And it takes you less than 10 minutes a day.
Yeah. And one thing I think to preface is maybe someone's listening to this and they're like, seven exercises? That's a lot. At the end of the day, these are 7 different exercises because we both believe that, everybody kind of has their own style. I won't say style, but like their own kind of way. Like one exercise might be easier or might make more sense or whatever for somebody than another one might be for somebody else. So the biggest key to this 7-day nervous system reset is being consistent with, 1 or 2 exercises that are in it and building a routine around it, because the overall goal of it is not to force yourself to do every exercise. The overall goal of it is to get consistent with regulating your nervous system on a daily basis, because it truly is the first step before you can do anything else, before you can heal your childhood wounds, before you can change who you are and step into a new reality for yourself. You have to be able to get yourself to an even keel, to where, basically a baseline that you can work off of. And it doesn't matter what you're working on. If you have a dysregulated or a nervous system that is out of whack, then you're just going to get pulled right back to it every time you hit a ceiling or a block that comes up, which happens all the time. We see it all the time. It happened to us way back when. So I think it's important to preface that, these 7 exercises are giving you options to basically turn regulating your nervous system into something that becomes habit and that you do daily.
So that is it for this episode. We would love to know what you think. If you got benefit from this episode, or you think there's somebody that's has any of these that they're being subject to them, or maybe they're doing them, then share this episode with them, and we will be back in a future episode. We got some amazing interviews coming up, and some other episodes that are just you and I, Sid, coming up that are going to blow people's minds.
Yeah, and go down there in that description, and go down there in that show notes, and get your 7-day nervous system reset. If you're listening to this, that means it's time to make change, and this is the way you start to do that. Go down there and grab those 7 exercises right now. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Cycle Breakers, where this channel is all about helping people clear out the blocks that are holding them back. We have a free gift for you, and that free gift is called our 7-day nervous system reset. The 7-day nervous system reset is where we help you calibrate your nervous system so you can go out there and control your emotions and start to take more control of your life, helping clear the blocks that are holding you back so you can start stepping into that dream life. It's absolutely free, and you can grab it down here in the description. And remember, our friends, let's dare to heal.